Story 1. My son looks outside the window every day at 2:12 a.m. Exactly 5 minutes later, there is knocking on the door. It started about a month ago. I woke up in the middle of the night, thirsty as hell. As I stumbled to the kitchen for a glass of water, I noticed a sliver of light coming from Ethan's room. The door was cracked open and I could see his small silhouette framed against the window. "Ethan?" I called softly, pushing the door open. "What are you doing up, buddy?" He didn't turn around. He just stood there, staring out into the darkness. "Ethan?" I tried again, a little louder this time. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes wide and unfocused. "Daddy, it's time," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. A shiver ran down my spine. "Time for what, bud?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he climbed back into bed and pulled the covers up to his chin. Within seconds, he was fast asleep. I checked my phone. 2:12 a.m. Weird. But kids do strange things sometimes, right? I tucked Ethan in and went back to bed, chalking it up to a random night terror or sleepwalking episode. The next night, I woke up again around 2 a.m. Call it parental instinct or just paranoia, but something made me check on Ethan. Sure enough, there he was at the window again. I checked my phone. 2:12 a.m. on the dot. This time, I didn't say anything. I just watched him from the doorway. He stood there perfectly still for exactly 5 minutes. Then, just as I was about to intervene, a sound pierced the silence that made my skin crawl. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps on our front door. Ethan didn't react. He just climbed back into bed like nothing had happened. With my heart pounding in my chest, I crept downstairs and peered through the peephole. The porch light illuminated an empty stoop. No one was there. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, maybe some drunk teenager playing a prank, but a nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. For the next week, the same thing happened every single night. Ethan at the window at 2:12 a.m., knocking at 2:17 a.m. No one at the door. I tried talking to Ethan about it during the day, but he had no memory of getting up at night. He just looked at me with those big innocent eyes and asked if we could have pancakes for breakfast. I was starting to lose it. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't focus at work. Every night I'd sit on the stairs, watching Ethan's door, waiting for 2:12 a.m. with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. One night, about 10 days in, I decided to do something different. At 2:10 a.m., I quietly entered Ethan's room and stood next to his bed. As the clock ticked over to 2:12, his eyes snapped open. He sat up, but when he saw me, he froze. "Daddy," he whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "Why not, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Because," he said, his eyes darting to the window, "she's waiting." My mouth went dry. "Who's waiting, Ethan?" But before he could answer, the knocking started. Only this time it wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the other side of Ethan's bedroom window. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it had started. In the eerie silence that followed, I could hear my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my heart. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Get away from the window. Now." But my son didn't move. His eyes were fixed on something outside, something I couldn't see. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his small hand and pressed it against the glass. That's when I saw it. A hand on the other side of the window, mirroring Ethan's. Long, skeletal fingers with blackened nails. The skin was pale and waxy, like that of a corpse left too long in water. "Jesus Christ!" I yelled, lunging forward to grab Ethan. But as soon as my fingers touched his shoulder, he let out an ear-piercing scream that made me stagger backward. The hand outside the window vanished, and Ethan collapsed onto the floor, his body convulsing violently. I scooped him up, my mind reeling with panic. As I turned to rush him out of the room, my eyes caught something that made me freeze in my tracks. There, scratched into the window glass, were 5 words. "I'm coming for him, John." A wave of dread washed over me. How the hell did it know my name? I ran downstairs with Ethan in my arms, fumbling for my phone to call 911. But as soon as I hit the bottom step, every light in the house flickered and died. In the pitch darkness, I heard something that sent chills down my spine. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound of nails dragging across wood, coming from every direction at once. "Daddy," Ethan whimpered, his small body trembling against mine. "She's inside now." I sprinted for the front door, my free hand outstretched in the darkness. But when I grabbed the doorknob, it was ice cold and slick with something wet. I yanked my hand back, feeling warm liquid dripping down my wrist. The coppery smell of blood filled my nostrils. "You can't leave, John," a voice whispered so close I could feel fetid breath on my neck. It sounded like Marie, but wrong, like her voice was being forced through a throat full of gravel. "We're a family again." "You're not Marie," I choked out, backing away. "My wife is dead." A chilling laugh echoed through the house. "Dead? Oh, John, I'm so much more than dead." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. I blinked, momentarily blinded. When my vision cleared, I saw her. Marie stood at the foot of the stairs, but it wasn't the Marie I remembered. Her skin was gray and bloated, her eyes sunken and filled with a sickly yellow light. Her once beautiful hair hung in wet, rotting clumps around her face. She wore the same dress we buried her in, now stained with dirt and God knows what else. "Marie," I breathed, unable to believe what I was seeing. Her mouth stretched into an impossibly wide grin, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "I've come to take our son home, John. It's time for Ethan to join me." Ethan squirmed in my arms, reaching out towards the thing that looked like his mother. "Mommy," he called, his voice a mixture of fear and longing. The creature's eyes locked onto Ethan, and she took a step forward. The floorboards creaked and squelched under her bare, mud-caked feet. "No!" I shouted, clutching Ethan tighter. "You're not taking him." I turned and ran for the kitchen, my mind racing. Salt. I needed salt. Wasn't that supposed to work against spirits or something? As I fumbled through the cabinets, I could hear Marie's wet footsteps getting closer. The air grew cold, and the putrid stench of decay filled the room. "Oh, John," her voice sing-songed from just outside the kitchen. "You can't protect him forever. Ethan belongs with me now." I finally found the salt and turned around, ready to throw it, but what I saw made the container slip from my numb fingers. Marie stood in the doorway, but her body was wrong. Her limbs were elongated, joints bent at impossible angles. Her head lolled to one side, neck stretched and distorted. And behind her, writhing in the shadows, were dozens of arms, reaching, grasping. Ethan screamed. In that moment, as I stared into the abyss of that horrifying scene, I knew our lives would never be the same. Whatever was wearing Marie's face, whatever had been coming for my son night after night, it wasn't going to stop, and I had no idea how to fight it. The thing that wasn't Marie lurched forward, its grotesque limbs scrabbling across the kitchen floor. I backed away, clutching Ethan to my chest, my mind blank with terror. My back hit the kitchen counter, and I realized we were trapped. "Please," I begged, though I knew reasoning with this creature was futile. "Please just leave us alone." The thing cocked its head at an unnatural angle, Marie's once beautiful features twisting into a mockery of confusion. "Leave you alone? But John, we're family, and family should be together forever." One of its many arms shot out, impossibly fast, grabbing my ankle. I yelped as icy fingers dug into my flesh, the chill spreading up my leg like poison. Ethan whimpered in my arms, his small body shaking uncontrollably. In that moment of pure desperation, something inside me snapped. A surge of protective rage coursed through my veins, burning away the paralyzing fear. I wouldn't let this thing take my son. I couldn't. With a roar, I kicked out at the creature's face. My foot connected with a sickening squelch, and it reeled back, momentarily stunned. I seized the opportunity, charging past it towards the basement door. If we couldn't leave the house, maybe we could find a way to trap it. I slammed the basement door behind us and fumbled for the light switch. The dim bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered space. Ethan clung to me, his face buried in my shoulder. "Daddy," he whispered, "I'm scared." "I know, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we're gonna be okay, I promise." That's when I saw it. In the corner of the basement, partially hidden behind some old boxes, was a door I'd never noticed before. It looked ancient, its wood warped and stained with age. From upstairs came the sounds of splintering wood and shattering glass. The creature was tearing the house apart looking for us. With no other choice, I approached the mysterious door. As I reached for the handle, Ethan suddenly spoke up. "That's where Mommy comes from," he said matter-of-factly. I froze. "What do you mean, Ethan?" He pointed at the door. "Every night at 2:12 that door opens. Mommy comes out and goes to my window. She says she misses us and wants us to come with her. But I was scared, so I didn't open the window." My mind reeled. How long had this been going on, and why 2:12 a.m.? Then it hit me. 2:12 a.m. February 12th, the day Marie died. Before I could process this revelation, the basement door exploded inward. The creature that wore Marie's face came slithering down the stairs, its body contorting in ways that defied physics. "Found you," it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers. I grabbed the handle of the mysterious door and yanked it open. Beyond it was not the foundation of our house, but a swirling vortex of shadows and mist. The air that rushed out was frigid and smelled of decay. The creature let out an inhuman shriek. "No, you can't send me back. I won't go alone." It lunged at us, its numerous arms outstretched. In that split second, I made a decision that would haunt me forever. I set Ethan down and kissed his forehead. "I love you, buddy. Always remember that." Then, using all my strength, I shoved the creature towards the open door. But as it teetered on the threshold, one of its arms wrapped around my waist. I looked at Ethan, saw the terror and confusion in his eyes. "Run, Ethan! Run upstairs and don't look back!" The last thing I saw was my son's tear-streaked face as the creature and I fell through the doorway into the abyss beyond. I don't know how long I fell. Time seemed to have no meaning in that place of shadows and whispers. But eventually, I crashed onto what felt like solid ground. I opened my eyes to find myself back in my own basement. The old door had vanished, leaving only a blank wall. Sunlight streamed through the small windows. Morning had come. Painfully, I climbed the stairs, calling out for Ethan. I found him curled up on the living room couch, sleeping peacefully. When I woke him, he had no memory of the night's events. It's been a week since that terrible night. The scratches on Ethan's window are gone, as if they never existed. He no longer gets up at 2:12 a.m. To all appearances, our lives have returned to normal. But I know better. Sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers coming from the basement, and in my dreams I see Marie, the real Marie, reaching out to me from beyond a door I can never open. I don't know if the creature will find another way back. I don't know if it's truly gone, or if it's just biding its time. All I know is that every night I check on Ethan at 2:12 a.m., and every night I pray that the knocking doesn't start again. Story 2. There's only 5 of us on this camping trip. We keep counting 6. There were bright flashes of red in the sky. It's as if someone was waving around a flare light from space, faint but noticeable. We all made UFO jokes and laughed as we nailed our tents into the ground. I knew for sure that there were 5 of us. We have all been friends since early middle school, and we're celebrating our high school graduation with this getaway camping trip. The flashes of red must have stopped randomly as we made conversation while fixing up our tents. Dave managed to put his tent together the fastest and told us he was going to find some branches for the fire. I remember how he had worked with me at the local gas station last year. We used to do the night shift together, and it had made working at a desolate gas station much more fun than it was supposed to be. There was also Eric in the corner, still reading his tent manual, fidgeting with his signature round glasses. I wasn't as close with Eric as I was with the others, but I still remember sitting with him in math class and copying his homework one time. Ava was also there talking with Sally, my cousin. Both had decided to team up and work on one tent at a time. I also have clear memories of them, hanging around at school in our usual places. In fact, I even knew Ava's younger brother, as he used to beg to go with us wherever we went. I bring all this up because I'm sure that there were 5 of us, including me, and that I knew everyone in the group. So Dave had went to get some branches as we pulled out some foldable chairs and set them up around the fire pit. I remember feeling uneasy as the sun set and darkness began to consume the forest. The shadows of trees elongated around us as the minutes ticked by. Eric went to get a flashlight from his bag while we wondered what was taking Dave so long. He appeared soon after, the harsh rustling sounds of the bushes signifying his return. We were all buried in our chairs at this point, covered by our jackets. The temperature had dropped quickly and a slight breeze was beginning to pick up. "Geez, you guys weren't even bothered to pull out a chair for me," Dave said as he arranged all the branches in the pit. We had set up 5 chairs around the fire. I tried to rationalize the situation, but no matter how hard I focused, my head felt like it was underwater. I had perfect clarity up until that moment, but when I tried to focus on why 5 chairs were occupied when Dave hadn't sat down yet, my head seemed to just stop working, as if something was reaching in and pulling out my thoughts. Instinctually, I felt even more uneasy now, and I had placed why. The whole forest had gone dead silent. I looked around at the faces of the others and could tell that they had felt the same. Eric was fidgeting with his fingers, trying to scan around the group and spot the extra person, but it was futile. I scanned every face, each etched in worry and frowning in frustration, except for it's. "All right, I'll get the chair myself," Dave said, breaking the silence and somewhat alleviating the tension. I got up and offered to help him. He looked into my eyes and nodded knowingly. We headed away from the fire pit towards the tents, but I kept my eyes glued on our group. "How many people are here?" I whispered to Dave as he looked around and realized that we had indeed only packed 5 chairs. In fact, every person had brought with them their own chair. They were heavy to carry, and we wouldn't bring any extra needlessly. "There's 5, right? I mean, there's 5 chairs," Dave replied. His voice wavered as he spoke. "No, I just think maybe one of us forgot our chair," I said. My mind was struggling to address the issue head-on, and now sought to find rational excuses instead. I didn't quite feel in control of my thoughts. It felt like swimming in a dream, and if I tried to force myself to think about who the 6th person was, my head would begin to throb. "Yeah, that sounds about right, actually," Dave said, relaxing and heading back to the group. When we walked back to the fire pit and circle of chairs, 2 chairs were empty. One for me and one for Dave. Everything was adding up now, even though we all agreed it wasn't before. Sally suggested we were all probably tired after the long hike to get here, and probably just needed some sleep. She could have been right. We were all sleep-deprived from waking up very early today to make it on time. Ava brought out the drinks. The whole 6-pack was emptied. We all moved closer to the crackling fire for warmth as we took sips from our cans and reminisced on memories of last year. Ava was in the middle of telling us about that one time she was home alone with weird things happening in her house when I got these sudden chills, despite the pleasant warmth of the fire. What felt cozy and safe moments ago felt wrong now, all because I realized that there was a crucial detail I missed. "Who started the fire?" I asked, completely interrupting Ava in the middle of her story and breaking everyone else's immersion. Everyone looked momentarily annoyed until they realized they had no answer. Once again, I scanned the faces staring back at me, all barely illuminated by the light from the fire, all familiar and pale from fear. "Wasn't it you, Dave?" Eric asked. Dave shook his head. "I think the person standing behind Jenny did it," Sally said, looking over at me. I whipped my head around so quickly it hurt. My heart was pounding in my ears. There was nothing behind me except for the encompassing darkness of the woods. Staring at those tall, dark trees behind me made me feel exposed. I felt like a lost bird in a vast field. "Wait, I mean, I don't know," Sally said. Her eyes had gone wide, and she was shaking visibly. She continued to look around frantically as Ava moved over to her, placing her hands on her shoulders and trying to calm her down. "I think we should leave this place," Ava stuttered. Yeah, something just doesn't feel right, but I can't put my finger on it, Dave said. But it's so dark out in the forest now, we'd probably get lost if we leave now. Someone else said, Yeah, I think we should stay the night and leave as soon as we can tomorrow. Eric agreed. I tried to protest, but realized Eric was right. The woods harbored an oppressive darkness within which navigation would be near impossible. Let's not sleep in our separate tents just to be safe, Sally said. We all agreed. We only brought one-person tents with us, but we could squeeze two if we tried. That way, no one would be alone at night. Following this conversation, we all got up and made our pairs. I went with Dave and Sally, like always, went with Ava. Eric kept complaining that he didn't have a pair, but we reassured him he did. He wouldn't accept it. I feel like at some point we all realized that there were only 5 of us, and suddenly we were all huddling up in the middle of the clearing. Why do we keep thinking there are 6 of us here? Eric asked. Sweat was dripping down his face despite the cold. We had nearly left him all alone on his own under the assumption that there was another person. My stomach turned as I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to mentally recap everyone here. My head throbbed, but I kept pushing it. There's me, Dave, Eric, Ava, Sally, and... I was pointing at each of them as I said the name. I retched and emptied the contents of my stomach on the ground when I got past Sally. The left side of my head felt like there was a knife stuck in it. My vision was blurry. Dave held me up to stop me from collapsing, and we all wordlessly started to move towards the tents as someone put the fire out. Dave helped me into a tent, while the 4 outside discussed what to do. I could only focus on snippets of the conversation as the excruciating pain beating against my skull came and went in waves. Sally had the brilliant idea of arranging 3 tents together, so their openings faced together at right angles in a sort of U shape, so we could sleep as close as possible and also limit the entrance to our tents. Dave was about to go to help as they worked outside, but I clutched his hand and asked him to stay with me. The tents took some time to arrange. I started to feel a bit better once everyone got settled into their tents. A quick head count confirmed there were 5 of us. Eric would have to sleep in his tent alone, but he was more comfortable with it, since all the tents were very close now. Looking back now, I think he was just trying to put a brave face on for us. I regret that moment deeply, letting him sleep in his tent alone. He was always less integrated in our group and knew that none of us would pair with him. Just before going to bed, we all agreed to leave as soon as the sun rose in the morning. I remember taking one last look outside the tent into the forest before trying to fall asleep. The wind had picked up, and the tree branches were swaying gently. Beyond our clearing was just pure darkness. It felt like the trees were closing in on me. With the faint moonlight illuminating our clearing, I turned my head to look over at the 2 tents we had left out and saw someone standing next to them. Despite the circumstances, sleep came quickly and easily. Ava's shrill scream woke me up in the middle of the night. Dave and I ripped our tent door open to find Sally and Ava looking into Eric's tent. We pushed them aside. Eric's sleeping bag was rolled up. He was still inside it, his head in the center, face contorted in utter agony. The rest of his body rolled around it with the blue fabric now dripping with dark blood. Dave zipped up the door of the tent. Ava was in shock. Her eyes had become glassy and unfocused. Sally was shaking her repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Dave picked up his torch and yelled at us to get up and run. We left the campsite behind and entered the trail we had come from. The 5 of us huddled together, Dave leading in the front as he cast his weak flashlight over the path so we could see it. All we had to help us get through this 2-hour trail was a small white circle of light. Even the moon failed to illuminate our surroundings through the dense foliage. Ava tripped and fell, twisting her ankle. We came to a stop. Someone said they knew how to splint it so we could keep going. They dragged her into the woods instead. It happened too quickly for any of us to process. Sally was about to run after Ava when Dave held her back. She struggled and managed to free herself, running into the trees to follow the echoes of Ava's screams. I was about to run after her, but Dave held me by the shoulders and shook me hard. "We need to get out of here, Jenny, please," he said. I hesitated but jolted into motion again when Sally's voice was cut off abruptly. She had been calling out Ava's name as she ran after her. Dave and I continued to run down the trail, trying to get to our car so we could get out of here. There was nothing we could do. At some point, there were 3 of us running on the trail, Dave and I shoulder to shoulder, while someone followed us closely behind. "Dave, who's behind us?" I gasped. My heart was threatening to burst through my ribcage and my legs burned. He turned to look at me. Confusion transformed into fear on his face, and then into rage. "You keep running," he told me as he produced a pocket knife from his pants. He handed me the car keys, which I nearly dropped. Then he turned around suddenly and jumped at whoever was behind us. I continued to run in fear as the sounds of a struggle grew behind me. I tripped and tumbled through the trail for what felt like hours. I didn't allow myself to stop. I almost cried when the trail ended, and I walked out into the familiar car park. Not wasting a second, I ran to the car and started it up, accelerating out of that forest and onto the highway within mere seconds. I'm typing this post out at a rest stop. My phone has finally regained service, and I've called 911 to try and explain the situation. I don't think they believe my version of events, but they sent a car my way regardless. As I wait, the sun is finally starting to rise. After I hit the post button on this, I'm going to check why the person in my back seat has been so silent the whole time. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing for more real-life horror story content. Thank you.